Okay, in this video, it will be very short, I think. I will try to answer the simple question, what is rationality, which is in German Verständigkeit, which is rationality in the ordinary sense. It should not be mistaken with Vernunftigkeit, which is also rationality, but in a Hegelian sense, in a mystical and speculative sense. Here I will talk about rationality in the ordinary sense, what in German we call Verständigkeit. But first, as I said, my new method, I will show the broad context of what I'm talking about. So it will take a few, just a few minutes, but it's just to situate, to contextualize. So here is the process of what people call God, namely the process of being in three parts, which is the science of logic, which is the mind of God, nature, which is kind of the body of God, if one might say, and spirit, which is God thinking itself through human consciousness. So here are the determinations of logic in blue, what we use to describe this in the context of modern sciences. So here's the process of God. It will be a little bit annoying, but at least I contextualize. I will do this for every video so that people know what I am talking about. So this is the first part. The second part is what we call nature. So it includes, you can see, you can pause if you want. I will do my best to help people speak German, at least the basic determinations of the German language. So here is nature in the broad outline. Yeah. Here is Geist, which means the soul of man, the consciousness of man, the mind of man, and the spirit of man. And what I'm talking about in this video would be here within psychology. I will talk about logic, which is in the Encyclopedia of Hegel, it's das Denken. And it's even in die Phänomenologie, that's the moment of der Verstand. So I will talk about der Verstand und das Denken. So this is where I'm currently situated, this video. So in erste Abteilung der subjective Geist, sections B and C. Yeah, you can see. Okay, and the last part. I will update as long as I can. I haven't had the time today, but I will update. So here is objective spirit, namely the institutions, the objectivation of spirit through law, morality, Sittlichkeit. I have updated, I have said here the secret societies in tune with the government. So, yeah. History and absolute Geist, art, religion, philosophy. So that's the broad context. So what I'm talking about in this video will be in subjective Geist, phenomenology of Geist, das Bewusstsein and das Denken. And also I said that in each video now I will, here is my singular self, this is where I live. I do not plan on moving, except if the circumstances make me move, but in the short term I will not move. So here, and yeah, this is a little joke. It should belong to Germany. It shouldn't be taken too seriously because that might upset some people. But yeah, I would like to just make mention to, I could add another name of the man that I've admired. It's a person which has encouraged me to, unconsciously of course, to share my knowledge in February, before I started making videos again. And if he hadn't given me this piece of advice, I would still be asleep. So whatever good eventually might come of my video, if any good can come out of my videos in the long term, I will owe a debt to a person who just gave me the right piece of advice at the right moment to do something positive with my life. So the question, what is rationality? There are 4 simple answers. It's very basic philosophy here. That's not a very speculative, not very complex, but the question to what is rationality, the first answer is the reason, or the rationality means the cause or the ground. This is the Ursache in German, the ursprüngliche Sache, namely the original or originary thing, in a way. That's the German word for cause, or the Grund. And this is the theory of efficient causes. In German, this is zureichend Grund. And this is the view of modern science and also the philosophy of Spinoza. Namely, I will illustrate with an example from Aristotle. Aristotle, in his theory of the 4 causes, he takes the example of a statue. He says that in order for a statue to be what it is, there has to be a material cause, namely the marble out of which the statue is being sculpted, the form of the statue, the shape of the statue, the shaping of the statue, the end cause, the final cause, namely the intention that the sculptor had in producing the statue, and the efficient cause, namely the production, the working, the sculpting of the statues. And modern science, since the 17th century, only believes, that's a way of talking, in efficient causes, namely that every phenomenon in nature, every event, every occurrence happens because of a previous determination. It rains because of the meteorological circumstances and the pressure and the atmospheric pressure and the determination of the clouds. The earth came into being because of the gas gravitating around the center of a vast cloud of gas, which eventually gave the solar system. So, or the idea of efficient causes, this is the modern rationality, but it's kind of blind and purposeless. I mean, everything happens because it is determined by the previous occurrence, but there is no process, there's no conscious process, basically. And that's the view that biologists, chemists, physicists have, namely that in order to understand an event, you have to understand the cause, and this is what they call rationality. And so, in this sense, rationality means to answer the question, when we ask the question, what is the reason? Another way of formulating the question is, what is the cause? And in this sense, an irrational behavior, in this sense of reason or rationality understood as the cause, an irrational behavior is a behavior whose cause is not understood. Someone who kills himself, or someone who quits his job although he had everything to be happy, or someone who shoots randomly people with a gun, whatever, it seems completely irrational because there is no apparent reason, in the sense that there is no cause. If the person had no particular trouble, psychiatric or economic or love, heartbreak or whatever, it seems irrational because it's bursting out of nowhere, apparently. And in modern historiography, a lot of historians claim that National Socialism was irrational because for them it was without any cause. It spontaneously appeared out of nowhere, and there was no rational ground or cause to explain. But a scientific and rationalist view consists in seeking the cause of everything. So everything is tied by causality. So that's the first view of what rationality is. The second view, which is partly tied to the previous, is the view that rationality or Verständigkeit means universality and or necessity. In German that is Allgemeinheit und Notwendigkeit. And this is what we call laws. Laws are universal, namely they are valid everywhere and at any time, and they are necessary in a sense that it has to be the way it is and it cannot be otherwise. And the very simple example is that if we drop an object, it will fall to the ground, not to the Grund, but to the ground, to the soil, because it is attracted by its inherent mass by the gravitational attraction of the Earth. So all objects fall according to certain determinate laws, so it's universal and it is necessary, but there are exceptions. There are objects which do not fall to the ground, namely balloons filled with helium, for instance, or spacecraft or spaceships, or if you throw an object into the air, or the smoke, or whatever. But it seems that the laws are broken, but actually they are not, because the laws of physics which explain the gravitational field which attracts all objects toward the center of the Earth, is the same laws also explain why a balloon filled with helium or a spaceship can extract itself from the gravitational field. So these are the same laws. So you cannot break the laws of nature, basically. So as Kant would say, but that's what every modern scientist knows, is that there is nowhere in nature where laws are not respected, and if it seems incoherent, it's not that the laws are incoherent, it's that the minds of men are not capable of grasping the laws. So the rationality in the mostly Kantian sense is what is rational is what is universal, namely it's valid everywhere and at every time and for every thinking entity, and it has to be the way it is and it cannot be otherwise. And this is what we call laws, and there are laws in physics, and since the 17th century, mostly through the works of Kepler, Galileo, Newton, etc., which sparked the scientific revolution, the development of science for the past 400 years, 4 centuries, has been the attempt and the quite successful endeavor of seeking laws in physics, chemistry, biology, and since the 19th century, in sociology, with the Durkheim, and before that Adam Smith in the laws of economics, etc., etc. So laws means regularity, universality, necessity, etc. In the realm of legislation, laws are rights, the rights and the legislation of a society, which is enacted by politicians or those who finance the politicians. And a law, in the sense of right, is valid for every member of the society, and it is necessary in the sense that it cannot be broken, or it can technically be broken, but if so, you will have to be punished by going to jail or paying taxes, or etc. And if there is an apparent lack of legislation, for instance, selling alcohol to underage persons, it breaks the law, for instance, that alcohol should be sold freely in Western countries, but the law seems to be incoherent because it is forbidden to sell alcohol to underage people. But there is a reason. The first one, there's a cause, namely that when you are young, you shouldn't drink alcohol. That's an explanation. So even the negation of the universality is founded upon reason, so to speak. That's the connection between the first and the second. Okay. Another moment is ethics, and here is the philosophy of Kant, die Kritik der praktischen Vernunft, namely the idea of Kant is that in nature, in physics mostly, everything happens according to laws, and man can only assert his freedom not by escaping from laws, but by setting his own laws, namely to adopt morals or maxims or sentences or principles of morality which in the behavior of man should be universal and necessary. Namely, man, according to Kant, should act in such a way that his behavior should be able to be universalized, and you shouldn't act spontaneously based on instincts or emotions, but you should act rationally, namely you should obey your own laws. Kant says you shouldn't lie, but that's a little bit difficult to follow this law, but that's difficult to follow all of Kant's laws, but this one in particular. But that's in the sense that ethics for Kant has to be rational. I mean, you shouldn't just do what you think spontaneously or what you feel is right, but you should found, in the sense of foundation, your moral and ethical behavior upon laws. And you should not choose your own laws personally, but you should choose the laws of your moral behavior according to a standard which should be universal. You should wish, according to Kant, that what you consider to be right should be considered right for all three agents, all men, and this necessarily. It shouldn't be a whim or a desire or a selfish will, but it should be universalized. And Kant is just the formalization, the rigorous explanation of what we know in religion as commandments. For instance, in the Bible by Moses. That's the same thing. These are laws provided according to the Christian or the Jewish view by God himself. And these laws, the Ten Commandments, they should be universal, they should be valid for all, and they should be applied necessarily. And if you fail to follow these laws, you will necessarily be punished. So that is the reason of the punishment. That's the first two views. Okay, now I skip the table. There are just two more. Another view, the third, is that rationality, Verständigkeit, is reasoning, or what we call in logical language syllogism. In German it is Schluss. It means P means particular, U means universal, S means singular. The particular is a universal. The singular is a particular. Therefore, the singular is a universal. The classical example is that Socrates is men are mortal. Men is the particular type of mortal creatures. Animals, other animals are other particulars. So P is man, U is mortal, S is Socrates, P is man. So because P is tied to U and S is tied to P, S is tied to U through the mediation of P. So the middle ground, without making a stupid plain word, but the middle ground, that's the cause of the unity between S and U is the particular. That's the basic form of syllogism. There are various forms, and this is classical reasoning unfolded and brought to light by Aristotle. And here I will take a very stupid example, but actually it's not stupid, it's coherent. IQ strongly determines social status for good and for bad, for success or failure. Such group, for instance, the Jews or blacks or any other group, has a relatively high or relatively low average IQ. That's an average. That's not each individual. It's an average distribution. So, yeah, and therefore, such group has a stronger likelihood, a stronger statistical probability of reaching a positive or negative social status in terms of income, wealth, degrees, crime, unemployment, etc., etc. So, if the premises are true, the premises are the first two sentences, then the conclusion is true. But then you have to check if the premises are true, and that's a problem of epistemology. But if IQ determines social status, and if an individual or a group has a higher average IQ, it is not necessarily, because strongly determines is not necessity, it's just statistical probability. But that's why I wrote a stronger likelihood, because in the premise there was strongly determined. It was not necessary. That's why there are stupid Jews and very intelligent blacks, and stupid whites and very intelligent Hispanics, etc., etc. It's just a mathematical determination. So that's an example. And finally, the fourth form of rationality is, do we see, the goal or the purpose or the aim. In German that would be the Zweck, das Zweck, namely the purpose. This is the final cause, or teleology. Telos means the end in Greek. So it is the consideration of the final causes. In German that's Endursache. Namely, this is acting intentionally with a plan in mind, with a purpose, with an aim, with a vision, with a long-term target, one might say. And this is in the realm of philosophy, the idea of providence, namely that the historical and cosmic process is driven by an end goal, an end purpose directed by God. So that's the difference between, I will not turn the table, but between efficient causes. An efficient cause is what precedes a phenomenon or an event, and a final cause is also at the beginning, but this is what directs teleologically, namely it is not present at the beginning, but it is what forces either the individual agent or the process to act according to certain purpose, to a certain pattern in with the intention, with the unconscious intention of reaching a destination, a goal. And the providence in religious terms, namely the idea that the historical process is aimed towards a certain end directed by God, or in more practical business matters, an example would be Ludwig von Mises with his book Human Action. I wrote here a little joke because I was in a good mood today, and I say I will try to thank God for every experience, and God is not just negative, there's also positive within God, so here I share a positive mood as long as I can. Mises wrote in Human Action precisely the idea that for Mises, here I will turn the table again, he rejected the modern view of sciences of only efficient causes, because for him, man, and here he was kind of a Kantian, man was kind of a free agent, namely man could set for himself goals, purposes, aims, which were independent from the causality of the natural process, and therefore man acts, according to Mises, intentionally, namely man act with an end goal. You work in order to get a salary. You study in order to get a good job. You go to the baker in order to buy bread, etc., etc. These are examples of end purpose. And here, in this sense, I forgot to say, but I will just turn the table again, because here is what, so that's the presentation, the broad presentation of what rationality is. Four very basic modes of rationality. So you have the first, the second, and what is, if you define rationality, you have to define irrationality. So in the first case, irrationality would be a groundless act, someone who acts without any apparent reason. That's what we call irrational, if we think in this way. In the second perspective, irrationality would be acting without obeying a conscious law based on emotion, tendency, spontaneity, instinct. That would be irrational in the sense that it would not obey a universal and necessary law. That would be a whim or an instinct. And in this third view, the view of rationality as reasoning, irrationality would be an error of reasoning, namely IQ determines IQ strongly determines social status. This individual has an IQ of 125, which is very high. Therefore, this individual will have a very high social status. This is an error of reasoning, because it is said in the premise that IQ strongly determines, but it doesn't say that it absolutely determines. There are other factors: psychology, health, circumstances, the political climate, etc. So it doesn't mean that if you have a high IQ, you will necessarily succeed. So that would be, if I said IQ strongly determines this individual or this group has a high IQ, therefore all the members of the group or this individual necessarily have to succeed or to fail, that's an error. That's a sophism in a way, or a paralogism, depending if you intend on faking or manipulating, or if you make a genuine error. That's an error in reasoning. So irrationality in this sense is what is contrary to logic. And irrationality in the fourth sense would be acting without purpose. It would be mindless action. It would mean to be in the world and to behave without any conscious aim, without setting yourself goals. That would be irrational. That would be a meaningless, a worthless existence. And a lot of people in the West suffer from a lack of purpose. They just wander through life without much consideration about any final cause or any greater purpose. So I don't blame them, because I have done this for most of my life, but that's just how things are. So that would be the definition of irrationality. So yeah, that's what I could say in 24 minutes about the question of Verständigkeit. And yeah, I am working every day, and I will keep producing better videos, but that's what I had to say for now.